The Outsiders meets Pumpkinhead. Does that sound like a good combination to you? What's up, everybody? Welcome to my review of Dark Harvest, which is a new Halloween supernatural horror film that came out in 2023 and is up on Prime, available to stream right now. So I checked it out a couple of days ago. This is a new film from the director of 30 Days of Night, David Slade, which if you have seen 30 Days of Night, maybe you would go into this with some decently high expectations because that's a great film. He also directed Hard Candy, which I've never seen, but I've heard is really good and is a fairly popular film. He also directed a Twilight film, Eclipse, I believe is the one he directed. You know, who do you blame for that? It's a Twilight film. So, but going into this without seeing the trailer, I would think personally that I would expect like a certain level of quality right off the bat. But I actually watched the trailer to this as a reaction video. And because I went in totally blind, Dark Harvest, I was like, hey, Halloween film, let me watch it. And then I thought it looked so terrible. I just didn't even upload it to my channel because I was like, this movie looks awful. I don't want to waste my time with it. So then afterwards, I'm just finding out it's directed by David Slade. It's very confusing to me why it looks the way it does. Then I went and just kind of watched or read through some reviews, and I saw some people saying, hey, it's like a good Halloween harvest time movie. There's some cool visuals, some cool kills. It's a fun time. I'm like, hey, let me give it a chance. So I did a couple nights ago, and without getting into all the negatives, let me start off with the positives. It's going to be spoiler free until I get into some of my negatives later on, and I will talk spoilers, okay? So starting off with the positives, the film takes place in Halloween time. So it's more of like a harvest time film, but it is Halloween, takes place Halloween night and like a couple days prior to Halloween. And it's in a small town. So you got small town, Halloween, cornfields, all positive things, right? Or they should be anyway. So if you love those things, you might enjoy it, but I don't know. I'd be hesitant. Point is, those are the things that we look for generally in a horror film that will maybe get me excited and some other people excited for like a seasonal time horror film. And this has all of those things. It also has a fantasy element in the story of Sawtooth Jack that is like this urban legend, I guess. Well, it's not necessarily an urban legend in the movie, but it's sort of this yearly story that people talk about that happens every Halloween time. And it's this sort of fantasy fairy tale that David Slade, I'm actually not sure if he wrote it, but that they wrote and created for this movie. And it's cool in theory. I think the concept could be cool. I mean, it's hard to come up with a new like Halloween tradition or a new like fairy tale or a new creature or something like that that's going to stand the test of time, like a new Sam or like a new, whatever, Pumpkinhead or something that will be like year after year people recognize as like a staple of the Halloween season. So it's tough to come up with a story like that. And I think that Sawtooth Jack has a cool design that could work and the story could work in certain places. Speaking of Sawtooth Jack, he does have some good visual effects as well as some good practical effects in moments used for him. I don't think all the visual effects work, but for him, most of the time they look pretty good. And then it's used with some pretty decent makeup effects that when are shown more close up. There's also some pretty good kills in this film. I wouldn't say, don't misunderstand that this is a film that you want to go see because of the kills, because that's what it sounded like to me when I heard some. It's not a film you're going to go into and you're going to just be able to just enjoy the kills. There's a few good kills when they happen, but that's not what you're going to be able to watch this film for solely and still have a good time. And, other than that, that's pretty much it. I can't think of much more that I really enjoyed about this film. So now getting into the negatives without getting into spoilers yet. Unfortunately, this film looks terrible. I think it's shot awful. The visual effects, except for with Sawtooth Jack, pretty much suck. There's a lot of time lapses shown to like show passing of time and try to create like a tone and a vibe, but it literally looks like they just stuck a camera in like a field, like pointed up at the sky. There's not anything cinematic to look at. There's not anything going on in the foreground, really. Like there's a few corn stalks. And there's a lot of shots like that where it just kind of looks like they stuck a camera on the field. So there's not much showing. There's nothing showing us the town. There's not like any drone footage that like kind of gives us like a nice idea of the environment. We get this shot of the town in the background on this road, and it looks super green screen, looks super fake. and just all the visual effects done in the corn and the buildings, and a lot of the stuff just looks really bad. And a lot of the visual effects with the creature and some of the kills and stuff also stand out. It's like there's some good visual effects, but there's moments that are bad that really take you out of it. So also the film just looks bad. It's not shot very well. The colors look bad. Everything just, it's not well composed. It doesn't feel like anything is really adding to the story. It doesn't feel like there's creativity behind the camera, trying to have some sort of direction. And then in addition to that, the acting just sucks. It's over the top. It's supposed to be over the top, and I understand that, but it doesn't service the story in any way. It's just a bunch of over the top characters, way too dramatic, being dramatic to every single situation that happens, dramatic in the town, everything that, like every reaction is just way over the top. And I'll get to that in my spoilers section a little bit more in a second, but the acting for the most part across the board sucks. There's a guy from Justified, I can't remember his name. He plays the guy with the limp. He's one of the brothers, and he plays a dad in this, and he kind of plays like a variation of his Justified character, which is like a slow talking, just sort of won't make eye contact, weak and wimpy character, and it just doesn't work. It's really annoying. It doesn't feel like a real person. Nobody feels like a real person at all. The mom, I don't know what is going on with the mom in this movie. She's ridiculous and over dramatic. Ultimately, the story of Sawtooth Jack is just stupid. It's just stupid. I couldn't help but think the whole time watching this film, this is just dumb. It doesn't matter at all. And there's nothing creative about it. There's no stakes. There's no good characters. Nothing carrying this film. It's just really dumb. And that's kind of unfortunate because I do think there is promise in there somewhere, but there's also a whole bunch of plot holes, which again, I'll get into in just a minute with some of my spoilers, but plot holes galore, and you can't help but watch this film and think about the plot holes basically the whole time. Oh, that's right. There's also a twist in this film. I'd forgotten about that because it is pretty predictable, and it's not like predictable to the extent that I knew exactly what the twist was the whole time, but you pretty much immediately know a variation of the twist or some form of it. And there's nothing that is so drastic that makes it like, oh, I knew something about that, but still caught me off guard. There's just basically a variation of something that happens in this film that's very predictable. And then once you get like 3/4 of the way through the film, it's pretty easy to piece together what that thing is. And unfortunately, it just, wasn't really a good enough story twist to even stand alone. And, like I said, predictable also. The writing in this film is just all over the place. There literally are moments where your main character that you're supposed to maybe be rooting for is talking to his best friend. And I will admit, I do kind of like the Outsiders, like greaser time period style that they brought into this film, but it doesn't really serve the film at all. But the character is literally talking to his friend, and his friend talks about how he's bigger and he's faster than his brother, and that he should, win this competition. And then like the next scene, he gets beat up by a bully, like his butt kicked. Like it barely even felt like he stood a chance or even tried. So he's not stronger. And then literally like a couple minutes later, he gets chased down by like a middle-aged cop. And he's just like running. He's running and it looks like he's a little child. And then the cop just runs and tackles him. And so he's not faster either. And so there's just all these contradictions with the writing, and you're supposed to I don't know if you're supposed to feel for this character and you're supposed to actually root for him or what, if that was the intention, but it's pretty ridiculous when they literally say one thing and show you another seconds later. There's a moment where the mom makes cupcakes for the main character, and he's all brooding and dramatic, and he's like, I'm gonna go do this thing that my parents won't tell me to do. And she's like, cupcakes, your favorite. And he's like, oh, okay, just one. Literally goes, there's just takes one. And then he's outside and in the street in the middle of this supposedly kind of serious scene, and he's just eating this cupcake. And it was just, I don't know what the motivation for that was. So I'm gonna get into some spoilers real quick. If you haven't seen Dark Harvest and you care to see it, stop here. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. if you're really, really interested in it, we give it a shot. I don't think it's worth your time. But now I'm going to talk about some spoilers. So getting into spoiler territory, the concept of this like run that they have to do for Sawtooth Jack every year, besides getting into all the plot holes, which are ridiculous, there's the setup is that they can't eat, right? They're locked away in a room for 3 days and they can't eat. So that gives them like motivation and strength to then get the candy out of Sawtooth Jack, which is just the stupidest addition. Like, why were they writing? They're like, we'll put candy in there because it's, Halloween. So candy inside of his stomach. So they eat candy. Just ridiculous. But anyway, the concept is right that they have motivation then to chase down Sawtooth Jack. So they can't eat. So the moment where our main character is all brooding and he's like leaving the house and his mom is like, hey, I made your favorite cupcakes. And he's like, no mom, I can't. I have to have motivation. I have to have motivation for this. But he's like, oh, I'll take just one. It's just the most ridiculous. Like, what was the point of that? And then he's out there and he's just like eating this cupcake. So it not only was a stupid scene, but then this character, again, not faster, not stronger, and then now also didn't even follow the rules for motivation. He's eating cupcakes, which is going to hurt his chances. So it's just like, what was the writing in this film? And then when all of those kids get locked in the rooms, and there's like this really serious scene, the parents are all like locking the doors, and I understand that it's supposed to be like 3 days they're in there, but it's like seconds later they show them locking the doors. So you can't have like a montage of them locking the doors and then seconds later have these kids like screaming on the doors, like banging, mom, 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 like they're absolutely starving to death. Like they haven't eaten in years. When seconds later you show us locking them in there. If you've got all these like time lapses trying to show the passage of time, give us a montage of something else. Or like, can they not just sit bored in their room? They're like smashing stuff into the walls, screaming, and there's not windows in their room. Like, they show us later the main character gets into a window. Are there not windows in these kids' rooms? They didn't lock them. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. It's so over the top, so dramatic. They're like starving to death, screaming, breaking, shattering things. It's the most absurd thing. Even 3 days is like not that crazy, especially when you know you're going to be locked away. They know they're going to be locked away. So just sit down, like read a book, dude. Like, what is this ridiculous reaction? Like doing push-ups, stuff, absolutely ridiculous and over the top. Real quick, I just want to touch on some of the plot holes for this film. Obviously, the twist, super predictable that the boy was not actually off in wherever he was on vacation, like doing something. It's really clear right off the bat, especially with like the postcards and the fact that there's this story going on that people are like, oh, he's here and he's here. Year after year, this winner gets this money and the small town can afford to give all these kids money and a new car. I mean, it's obviously super predictable that happens, but then the concept, right, is that you find out that they're sacrificing these kids. And amongst the other ridiculous plot holes and ridiculous things that they don't explain, like the ritual and how later on they show him like time lapse rotting away for a year at the end of the movie when our main character gets hung up. They show him like rotting away, but in the beginning of the film, on Halloween night, the gardener was the one that hung him up on Halloween night. So he didn't sit there for a whole year. So besides the fact that that's unclear and not consistent, the fact that they have to sacrifice a kid to keep the harvest every year, otherwise this big cloud comes. But then literally like dozens of kids die. Dozens and dozens and dozens of kids die from Sawtooth Jack. So why don't they just abduct a kid? Or they could literally just have the race every year and there could be they don't have to like hang somebody up for that to happen. They could just make up some story and then just abduct a kid. Like what? Or they could just use one of those kids. Why do they even have to just grab one of those kids? I don't understand. Or why did those not count as sacrifices? Are those not because they'd be buried? But then I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. What were the rules? Maybe if they explained them better, but clearly a huge plot hole that someone needs to be sacrificed and all these people die, and it's really stupid. Doesn't make any sense. Of course, there's a bunch of other plot holes. So that's it. That's my review of Dark Harvest. This movie sucked. Sorry if you liked it. I just was super disappointed with it. The bar for entertainment for these movies recently, maybe I'm judging it really hard because it got a theatrical release because of the director. And maybe if I had like no expectations at all, which I barely did, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. But honestly, just the bar is so low for movies right now. I feel like people, like this movie shouldn't have gotten decent reviews, people saying that they had a fun time with it. I feel like people are just accepting of like any crappy movie right now. I don't know. This movie sucked. It's really boring, really dumb, pointless. I would not recommend it if you haven't seen it. And yeah, thanks for watching, everybody.
I'm running scared, I'm a big bad wolf. Oh, I never see the silver lining, only see the gold. I don't speak in caps, dog, everything bold. And I put that on myself, cause it's a life that I done chose. I said come through, you can see me on the west side. Now it's funny how they walking